Can God play a significant game with his own creature? Can any creator, even a limited one, play a significant game with his own creature?
Hello and welcome back to Rehydrate. This season, we'll be reading and discussing Dan Simmons' Hyperion. This is Season 8, Episode 5, The Long Goodbye, covering Part 5. The hosts have only knowledge of this book up to this part. My name is Dan.
My name is Talia.
My name is Priya.
All right, well, we have definitely the longest chapter so far, so I think let's just jump right into the summary. Father Hoyt discovers that Het Metstein's room is covered in blood. They search the ship, but he is nowhere to be found. When the Windwagon arrives at Pilgrim's Rest, they unload their belongings into a cable car, including Het Metstein's belongings, which include an erg, a small creature that can generate a force field that is inside a Mobius cube. Het Metstein was supposed to be the next to tell a story, but in his absence, the detective, Braun Lamia, is next to tell her story. Braun Lamia, a private detective, is approached by Johnny, a cybrid, which is a human body with an AI mind. Johnny believes that someone has wiped his past 5 days of memories, which he equates to murder. He wants to hire her to figure out who it was. Johnny is perplexed why someone would want to murder him and explains that it would make more sense for someone to attack him in the data plume versus attacking his body to truly get rid of him. He then tells Lamia his backstory and that he was created as a personality retrieval project. His mind is meant to be a recreation of the 18th century poet John Keats. Lamia decides to follow Johnny as his bodyguard and catches a man with a ponytail, whom she refers to as Q, trailing Johnny. When she approaches him, he attacks Lamia and runs. She chases him down a few Farcaster portals and eventually catches up to him at Maui Covenant, where they fight and Lamia beats him. As she starts to question him, he self-destructs by bursting into blue flame, revealing that he is also a cybrid. Before she is caught by the authorities, Lamia escapes via a hawking mat, basically a magic carpet. Johnny aids her by directing her mat to a multi-portal 8 meters below the water. Lamia finds Johnny waiting for her on a planet that is a reconstruction of old Earth. They end up in a recreation of John Keats' home, where the poet died. Johnny theorizes that the Technocore, which is a conglomerate of AIs, is trying to create God, and shares with her his memories of the poet's Keats' final days. Later, Lamia and Johnny end up sleeping with each other. The next morning, they're assaulted by 5 Lucians who burst into their room, but Lamia is able to fight them off. She questions one of the attackers, who tells her they were sent by the bishop to bring Johnny back to the Shrek Temple on Lucius. Johnny and Lamia go to the Shrek Temple to confront the bishop. The bishop tells him that Johnny has offered to go on a Shrek pilgrimage 8 days ago, but then seems to have changed his mind. Johnny realizes that traveling to Hyperion involves transferring his consciousness to his cyber body, effectively becoming fully human. He also realizes that this is the reason he was killed, presumably by a Technocore. He decides that he wants to follow through with this and asks Lamia to come with him. She agrees. Ron then travels to Tau City Center to meet with Maina Gladstone to uncover more information about the Technocore's interest in Hyperion. Lamia goes to see B.B. Serbinger, an AI expert, to have him help move Johnny's consciousness entirely to his cybrid. As they're in the data plume, they try to get Johnny out, but there's a giant explosion, and Johnny is able to rescue Lamia, but as they exit, they see BB's head has exploded, but not before BB can pass the data along to Johnny to become human. Johnny learns that interstellar war was an inevitability. Its predicted outcome is disputed among the different factions of AI. He also learned that his creation and decision to go to Hyperion was dangerous to the volatiles, so they tried to murder him. Lamia finds that Johnny has implanted a device inside of her that allows him to interface directly with him and is able to store an almost infinite amount of data. Lamia and Johnny try to make it to the Shrek Temple so they can get transport to Hyperion. But a mere 30 meters before getting to the temple, they're shot by a multitude of beams and projectiles. They barely make it into the Shrek Temple, but once inside, Johnny dies from his wounds, and his last words are Fanny, the name of John Keats' lover, but not before he is able to transfer his consciousness into Lamia via the shunt he had installed. Lamia recovers in the Shrek Temple and realizes that she's pregnant before making her journey to Hyperion, in a sense, together with Johnny.
The characters in this section are Johnny, a cybrid AI, who is also Lamia's client. Ernest B.B. Serbinger, who is an AI expert. Then there's Q, who's a Lucian, who initially appeared to be Johnny's attacker, but is later revealed as a cybrid and Johnny's bodyguard. Then there is the bishop of the Shrike Church on Lucius. There's Maina Gladstone, who is CEO of the Senate of the Hegemony. And then we have 3 AI factions that are revealed to us. The stables believe that symbiosis between AI and humans is necessary. The volatiles, who believe that humans' usefulness is in the past and they should be made extinct. The ultimates, who only care about the UI project and usually align with stables until Hyperion.
All right. So a lot of stuff happened in this chapter. I think we'll go with Talia first for her first impressions of this chapter.
All right. So we read the detectives chapter, and it really does open like a film noir as we like enter into her office, and it's revealed that like she has her feet up on the desk and leans forward when she gets interesting news of murder. So, we see a very different writing style as we have come to expect in the Simmons chapter. I didn't find it hard to follow at all. And it was the first time that the interstitial events around the stories actually seemed like it had a little bit more meat. Like we have this murder or disappearance, I guess, of Het Mestine in the beginning. And that was definitely easier to care about than like, oh, we're having some kind of ship delay. But never fear, a different form of tech that you haven't heard of is going to carry the ship on anyway. So yeah, I'd say like more interest in the interstitial. No difficulty reading this, no flowery language or technical terms to get through, but not the same kind of powerful center that I felt with the Priest's Tale and the last chapter, the Scholar's Tale. So I was interested in the world that they built out, and we're starting to see more things connect. Like every time a chapter happens, I feel like we have more recurrences. Obviously, we've come to expect the Shrike, although we don't see it in this chapter, but we get Lucis and more about the information about the technology of the world, and more information about Keats. And I think that's probably the most interesting, but yeah, just not as powerful of a core, more like interesting suburbs around this chapter. How about you, Dan?
Yeah. Actually, one question before
Sure.
I go. So you had said it was like there's not a lot of technical terms that were difficult to read. I think this chapter had the most technical terms of all of them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I agree with Dan.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
I think a lot like there's like a lot of like like Technocore and all the AI stuff and all like cyber pukes and all this terminology.
But it's only like a hiccup away from cyberpunk, and you get strong characterization of what the character's like. So, that I didn't really mind, but it doesn't need to be one by one. Tell me what other reasons you have to agree with Dan, Priya.
I think that in general, there is a lot of action, exposition, and there's a lot going on. Like to break down what is happening in Technocore or with Technocore, what exactly the different types of AI are, and also just following along in terms of like the significance of all of these things and their correlation to what's happening on Hyperion with the Shrike. I think it was a lot to follow, and I don't know. I just I found it hard to stay tuned in to a lot of parts. A lot of the gravitas that I feel like the author would want you to feel was kind of not earned. And I hate to say that. That's a very strong sentiment, but that's just the sense that I got.
Yeah. I'll say that like, I think I share, I think I'm closer to Priya's opinions on this one than Talia's. I kind of also got lost in a lot, like there seemed to be like a dichotomy of like two different like styles. Like there's like a lot of action that like it's all around a detective novel, right? And there's like a lot of action that's happening, it's like good descriptions of like, her chasing the guy through the Farcaster portals. And like, I thought it was cool, like, chasing him, through different worlds like that, like, and talking about gravity and like that being a factor and like be able to catch him and that kind of stuff. But then there's a lot of just like plot descriptions of like like lore, I guess, of the world and like what's happening with the different AIs, and how the different AIs like are fighting against each other, and like there's different factions of the AIs. I don't know if you guys have ever played the Metal Gear games, but it reminded me of that kind of storytelling where it's just like all this like stuff happening, and it's like what? You just kind of read it and like you just don't really fully understand it, but you hope someone else understood it, and then you kind of read a summary afterwards, like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. But like as I'm in it, like it was kind of difficult to follow.
You're describing a detective novel right now.
Yeah, I guess so. But like,
Probably why I don't read detective novels. Maybe this is why.
yeah, I mean, I know you guys didn't read the robot series, like the Asimov robot series, like that came right at, like that preceded Foundation stuff, but like that is that seemed to be more of like a true detective story than this one. I mean, I guess like I don't know, like I guess style wise they're very similar, but those are easier to follow because like that was like a mystery, and like you kind of like uncover the mystery a little bit, and like who like set up the major mystery of the story, and then it's eventually resolved in like a a twisty kind of way. But this one is just like there's too many other like elements happening. It's like it's because it's too woven into the rest of the story, into the rest of the book, and like so it's like trying to like weave in like too many things, and it got kind of convoluted for me to really fully understand and grasp it. It wasn't self-contained enough, I guess, to be a detective story to me. I don't know. I don't really have any like straightforward thoughts because like I think maybe because like the chapter was so convoluted. It was just kind of hard to understand what was happening, and it was really long too. I think that also kind of detracted from the story a little bit for me.
If I can add a few things to that, let's just all collectively just hate on this chapter. No, I think it's very interesting here because Dan and I are for once aligned on how we felt about the chapter, and Talia, if I'm getting the sense, enjoyed it much more than we did. So I feel like this is the first time where I truly get the sense that the author is doing too much in too short a span. Even though it's very long, I think that it's long because he's trying to squash in so many different elements. So there's, the technicalities of, techno core. Then there is trying to wrap our heads around what these AI are. But then there's also the fact that there's this retrieval project where they were basically trying to retrieve personalities from the past, and one of them ends up being Keats. Now, I have a lot of love for John Keats, and I think that for them to have put before us this character of Johnny as the reconstruction of John Keats, if you're going to do that, you really have to earn it. You can't just earn it by reciting John Keats's poetry. And maybe you can argue that this is deliberate, that he's not at all like John Keats because of BB's argument that, whenever you try to do this personality retrieval project, the AI always breaks down and goes insane. But Johnny is not insane. He's just not very good at personifying John Keats, I would say. And furthermore, I feel like if you're going to introduce a romantic element and you're trying to do too many things at once, and even that doesn't feel earned, it kind of detracts from the storytelling a little bit. Like, I did not buy at all that this AI reconstruction of John Keats falls in love with Braun Lamia of all people. And by the way, at one point towards the end, when after a few mentions of him saying, "Hey, you remind me of Fanny. You remind me of Fanny," I suddenly remembered Fanny's full name, which is Fanny Braun. And that's why Braun Lamia is Braun Lamia. And that also is not earned. So, I think that
Lamia, the name means more than just, Braun means more than that. Her first name is Lamia. And he says, "I'm no more a poet from being named Keats than you're a monster from being named Lamia." Did you catch that one?
Lamia is her last name, no?
Yes, I believe so, because she asks him to informalize and call her Braun. But
Yes.
Lamia is like a child eating monster in Greek mythology, and so there's like allusions in her first and last name.
True. But I think
Although
that
that might make you hate it even more.
yes, because I mean, Fanny Braun was supposed to be a source of like great joy and light in John Keats's life. And I don't think that this character of Braun Lamia has been given enough shape in this chapter. Um, for me, up until this point, up until I realized the connection to Fanny Braun, like with the name itself, I thought Braun was just referring to the fact that she's really, really strong. um, and maybe it's also referring to that. But I feel like because I'm a reader who's very character driven, like I characters either make or break a story for me, often single-handedly. I think if the characters don't earn the sentiments that are attached to them, and evoking John Keats is a very sentimental thing to do. I would argue that. And evoking Fanny Braun is also a very, very sentimental thing to do. And I think in both characters, these sentiments are not earned.
But Johnny's pretty handsome. So did you consider that? Like, I think that's the whole reason behind their romance.
I mean, I should have thought about that, but apparently I did not.
To the hunk, Priya. You really skimmed over that in your characters list. You didn't mention how hot he is.
I forgot to mention that we should have counted. I should have counted the number of times to say how she mentions how handsome he is. Like, it had to been up in the like 20s.
It's not 20s. You're exaggerating, but I think
I don't know. Like, it's probably like 20 in like the first like section.
All right, that's the over under. Absolutely not. Dan's betting above. I'm betting below. But I did think that, like I said, I didn't find it difficult to read, but I think it didn't bring scorn to me. But I think I had a similar feeling to you two, in that I wasn't sure what the important parts were. Like, I wasn't sure where to cast my significance. And I've been known to enjoy detective tales before, and there is usually like an aha moment. And if the aha is pregnancy, then that's not an aha to me. It's not.
Exactly. Yeah.
Was that the aha?
No, she also has she has a cruciform. I think we left.
They said that it's like, I think that was like a metaphorical cruciform. Like, exactly. It's not like a cruciform. It's like the thing that's in like the disc that got implanted.
That which persists,
that makes her.
I think that's.
Yeah. I took that literally.
You troglodyte, Priya. No, I don't think. I think there is a reveal coming. I just don't think it's happened yet in this chapter.
I mean, I thought like the reveal was that it was the volatiles like that wanted Johnny killed.
Of course, you love the factions part, Dan.
Oh yeah,
if there's anything predictable in the world.
But yeah, I mean, I think that was the reveal, right? That like that. Oh, it's like the other AIs that want to kill him because he wants to go to Hyperion. Or I don't know. Is that why? I don't know. Like I think that's part of the problem, right? It's like I didn't fully understand like all of like the world building that was happening, and maybe we're not meant to, or I don't know. Maybe it'd be better on the second read. Once we understand the entire story and you kind of go back and understand it. But like in the moment, like it was really difficult for me to understand everything that was happening. I mean, like that's kind of the problem why the summary this time was so disjointed, is because like I write it as I'm reading, and it's like I don't like there's whole sections I just didn't put in there because like I didn't know what was going on. So like the whole like the part of like Gladstone, like I still don't really fully understand what was happening there. Priya and I were talking about it before we started recording, and like I think neither of us really fully got it. I will say though, that part, the meta part of their meeting was really interesting to me, like how like the information is so secret that they got into a Farcaster portal to like some remote planet so no one could hear them.
Security.
That part was cool. It's like reminded me of like the Sophon free room,
And I wanted to say that too. Like there was obviously like as soon as we start talking about ultimate intelligence, like ding, like my psychohistory nose went off. But the escaping of actually the ultimate intelligence was what reminded me more of the Sophons. Like they're trying to find humans or entities or places like Hyperion or like Johnny or like Bronlamia who can't be accounted for in psychohistory or in this algorithm that the AIs are spinning. And that reminds me of the attempt that humans make to make soap on free rooms and of something called the Sishir Nabi in Dune. I won't say what it means or anything about it, but you guys should read Dune, and any listeners who have will understand that. There's another aspect that revolves in science fiction, basically about prescience. Yeah.
So you said when you were reading it, you kind of understood what was happening. Did like you didn't have a hard time reading it? Did you understand like all of like the world building was happening as you're reading it, or like
Oh
did you
boy,
also?
well, here's the way to set me up for failure. To say yes, I understood it all. Um, I don't know if I can go so far as to say I understood it all, but I certainly enjoyed the world that they built. Like when they're looking for an absence, and Lamia's like, "Yeah, a strange incident of the dog in the night." Like that's a reference to the curious incident of the dog that barked by Sherlock Holmes. And I was grateful we didn't get through a detective chapter without referencing Dr. Holmes. But yeah, like even when we're in Keats's birthplace and he tells her like this is sculpted by Bernini, that's my favorite Renaissance sculptor, Team Bernini. We learn more about the tech. We learn about this Schoen's disk that is like near infinite storage capacity in her head. We learn that Farcasters are not, Star Trek teleportation devices. And they don't record every atom and send it somewhere else. They're just like a crude hole ripped in space time. We're introduced to Mobius cubes, so I found it satisfying. I don't know if I understood it all, but I never had to go back and say like, well, what's happening?
Yeah, maybe that was the problem. Like I didn't go back. I just kind of like said, I don't know what's happening. I pushed forward.
Well, that's
Maybe
just lazy reading. I don't know what to say about
yeah,
that.
I mean maybe like
Damn.
I just saw like the raw page count and like we are kind of against the clock here. I was like I gotta just push forward and hopefully people can explain it to me.
Inside baseball. It's how the
Yeah.
sausage is made.
Well, I didn't lazily read this. I read it with a good amount of time, for the actual reading itself. But my problem was that I didn't find myself caring enough about the things that I didn't understand to go back and reread. Because I feel like, many times where I came upon something that I was like confused by, I was like, but why is this important? And I couldn't really like I couldn't bring myself to care about it. Like there's this the one part that I found myself initially caring about was the conversation that that Johnny and Lamia are having in the recreation of old Earth place where they're in his John Keats's old house where he died, and he talks about his memories of John Keats's final days, and it's the writing becomes kind of beautiful in that section. And even the part that I enjoyed, I was like, but why is this important? Like, why is this important to the plot that he is sitting here talking about John Keats's final days? And it's almost like, who is he to talk about John Keats's final days? He's just like this reconstruction who up until this point keeps claiming that, hey, hold on, I am not John Keats. I'm a poor reconstruction at many times he implies of John Keats. So then it feels like this section where he's describing his final memories and the feelings of those that experience that John Keats has, again, doesn't feel earned, and I can't bring myself by the end of it to care about this character. And also the way that he's unceremoniously killed off, and the fact that he just claims that she reminds him of Fanny and that he's in love with her out of the blue, it feels. So yeah, not just with this section, but with a lot of different sections where things are happening, I'm just like, why do I care about this? And it also took me back to a lot of times in Foundation where I felt that way, that, hey, he's done a lot of cool world building, but he hasn't, I think I think Talia said this at the very beginning, that there isn't a strong, what did you say? There's not a strong like center. There's not a strong, like, in the previous chapter,
To
we
like
had
a
something.
city. Like I couldn't find a core. I could only like find certain like suburbs. That's just the way I interpreted it.
Yeah. So, there's a very profound emotional center in Saul Weintraub's story, which is his daughter, and the impact that, the strike has on his daughter and the time tombs have on his daughter. So we're remaining focused in certain chapters on the actual themes of this world that we're dealing with. And then in this chapter, I feel like he's trying to bring the whole universe into it versus the world that we are concerned with as far as Hyperion goes. So that's why it becomes too much. And then I become unsure of what it is that I actually care about.
I think in the last chapter, like all the world building was like very centered on like Saul's perception of the world, like with his experiences and like that kind of thing. And then this chapter was like just like the entirety of like of all the mysteries that are happening, in the story, like all of like these different AI factions that are battling each other and like what's actually trying to happen on Hyperion. There's like sort of two different of the amount of world building that's happening in both of them. And so it seems like, yeah, maybe he's trying, like he realizes getting towards the end of the book and he's like cram it all in there and like tell the reader like what's happening. But it was just too overwhelming, I thought, too much.
Pacing issues,
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah.
I hope the next chapter is not like this.
Well, I mean, I'm guessing like the next chapter, I mean, to me, the next chapter has to have more of non-story material that's happening, right? Because like we need to know, like hopefully we're going to find out what's actually happening, right? They're going to get to the place and like find out what's happening, right? Like this one at the end of the story was like less than a page of extra material, right? Like I didn't even put anything in the summary because like nothing happened. They just like oh, okay. That's your story, huh? So I'm guessing like next one is like the actual like backstory for the console won't be that much, right? It's going to be more of contemporaneous storytelling. That's my guess anyway. I have no idea.
What's ironic is like this was the longest chapter, but I feel like I have the least to say about it. That I have a lot to say about it that's like negative, but I have the least to say about it in terms of like actually meaningful conversation about it. And it's a little weird to me that like the next chapter, which is supposed to like close everything off, is shorter than this chapter.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm a little worried about the ending of this. I almost felt like I picked up a different book when I started this chapter. So I think that there's some issues with like consistency of tone, and some of that is to be expected because again, I'll take us back to the thing that I've been saying since the beginning, the shifting in perspective, first person versus third person, how it kind of shifts back and forth. You're getting the stories of considerably different people. So different personalities. So some of that is to be expected that, one chapter will feel different to the other. But I feel again like some chapters do a really good job of showing us why we should care about this. And some, like this chapter, don't give that to us kind of at all. Even though you feel like there is the material there to do that, but it's not working for some reason.
Were there parts about this chapter you did like?
I don't know. Perhaps not.
None? No parts?
No, I didn't like anything about this chapter.
Wow. I mean, I thought there were parts that were interesting.
That's ice cold. Go on, Dan.
I know.
I didn't like the characters. I didn't like the writing. I didn't like what they've done to poor John Keats. They brought him back to life to kill him again.
All right, Zombie Keats is not hitting with Priya.
Nope. Zombie AI Keats not working for me.
I think like the overall story, like, yeah, definitely it was just too much for me. But like I think that the little moments, like I said, like the secret meeting room and the with the Gladstone, that was cool. Just the idea of the personality retrieval project I thought was interesting. Like I can see that happening, right? Like AI is recreating people eventually. Probably for a commercial gain, I'm sure eventually. Yeah, the stuff Talia mentioned too, talking about the Mobius cube and the disk that's in her brain that like somehow is able to store infinite amount of data or a near infinite amount of data. Yeah, just those kind of like little things, I think, were
Also,
interesting to me.
what an invasion! Like, what an invasion of another human being
Yeah.
to have
Yeah.
a thing put into their brain while they're unconscious.
I mean, she was furious when she found that shunt.
But she didn't stay furious for long enough at all.
Right. I mean,
He was just like, trust me. And she looks at him, and because he's apparently very attractive, she's like,
can you
okay.
say anything bad to those was it brown eyes? Those beautiful
Was it
brown eyes.
hazel eyes?
Those brown eyes. I thought it was, I don't know, just like Dan said, I liked the security. I liked the farcasting in this even more than the Poet's Home with his like 31 different farcasting rooms. I really felt like the world was very real, like that there, of course, if farcaster technology existed, there'd be a museum or like theme park where I'd be like, oh, I'll take your kid, walk through 1.7 gravity. Like, of course, that is exactly what would happen.
Yeah, that part was that. Yeah, I think the descriptions of farcasting in this chapter were way better than all the rest of the chapters. Like they kind of like mention it offhand, but this one's like really talking about like, and they give a description. Like I have a quote, and I think you mentioned this before, but it said like, if the portals are true teleportation, the transport data record could have recreated the subject down to the last gram and follicle. Instead, a farcaster is essentially just a crude hole ripped in space-time by a phase singularity. So I think that part was really cool. I mean, obviously, I'm pretty sure I've talked about it on this podcast before. Big Star Trek fan, so I understand like all the. I don't understand it, but like I'm aware of how the teleportation works there. And then this is much different in that it's mostly just kind of like a black hole or wormhole or something that like kind of transports them through large distances. But it's really on a mass scale. They talk about millions of them, right? I thought that was that the descriptions here I thought were really interesting.
Yeah. I also thought that the cyberpuke, the BB that they use and trash, there's these characters who seem to split into existence. Like Johnny becomes John, becomes human, and then like 10 seconds later is dead again. But the same fate happens to BB, the cyberpuke. But his very appearance reminded me of that type of person exists. People who are only comfortable when they're hardwired in and only take breaks when they're mandatory and required. That again feels very true to life. And in Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, he also describes a subculture of people who stay continuously connected, and they are not called cyber pukes in that one, but gargoyles, like hunched over, wearing their portable tech, holding like that laptop in front of them, always having a keyboard accessible, hunched over. And for me, it was funny to read the Stephenson quote because I went to an engineering school and I would see people walking around, socializing, even at parties, holding a laptop. Before I ever read this book. So it was very funny and very true to life for me. I'd still say the priest's story was my favorite, but I certainly found things to appreciate in this one.
You know who wouldn't install a brain shunt in another person without their consent?
Let me guess.
The actual John Keats. The actual John Keats wouldn't do that. Not to belabor the point, but...
What about Bernini's rival, Borromini? Would he have inserted a plastic shut?
No, none of them would have. And I do not care for Johnny. Oh man, but I the point that you raised about like these characters who are put in to just be killed off, those are the words that I focused on. Yeah, that's another issue, which is that, in a lot of in 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 sci-fi or in like a detective type story, where you're focused more on trying to world build or trying to further a plot, you might end up putting in characters. And I feel like Asimov did this a lot, right? Like you would have a character only for the purpose of propelling a plot. That is their sole purpose, and then they are just wasted after that. That doesn't sit well with me. Like, don't introduce someone unless like it's clearly an extra, but like just for the sake of revealing a little small tidbit of information, or like BB's whole purpose seems to have been to do this one act and then his head explodes. Like, no, like doesn't work for me. But I'm interested to see how in the next chapter, if he can bring all of these threads that he kind of put forth in this chapter, can those be brought together and connected to the Shrike and Hyperion in a way that's actually meaningful and makes you think like, oh, this is why we were told about all these different things, all about the AI, about the three factions, about the personality retrieval project. Like, are all of these things going to somehow tie in seamlessly with Hyperion and the Shrike? That's my question.
Yeah, it seems like we didn't get any really advancement on the actual like story on Hyperion. Like we don't get any more information about the time tombs or anything. Like they kind of mention them, but like I don't feel like I have any really better understanding of like what's actually happening there.
Nope, no better understanding on like the Shrike and the time tombs and Hyperion, just building out
Yeah.
the world and the tech and the forecasting and this character. Like all the other characters, I think have been mentioned in some peripheral sense. Like they turned to Saul Weintraub, they've heard of him. Even his daughter is referenced in this chapter, but
Yeah.
Ron Lamia has been a dark horse. And even in the beginning, they're like, "Oh, well, maybe Hetmastine was murdered so that like someone could tell their story next." And she's really practical. She's like, "Well, they would only advance themselves like one place." So we like finally got some characterization of her just because Priya hates her boyfriend.
What I really want, what I really, really want is some vindication of why Keats, like beyond the author just is a fan of John Keats. I want there to
I
be
think
something.
we're going to find out. We live
Yeah.
on Keats. This is called Hyperion. Lamia
Yes.
is a famous poem written by Keats. I'm sure we're going to find out.
Yeah. So I hope that at least is earned by the end. Because if it's not, then everything kind of just like collapses on itself, right? The whole premise kind of becomes weakened if you cannot make your biggest character of John Keats, not Johnny, but John Keats. If you cannot earn that one, then things
We'll see.
are not going to work out for this book.
None of the hosts have read this, so we'll see.
I mean, someone thought to give this book the Hugo Award, so
I think there's a lot of reason to have hope.
yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, like I'm still positive on the book overall. It's like I think I didn't hate this chapter as much as Priya did.
It's hard to imagine anyone.
Yeah. Because there were things I liked about it. And yeah, like overall, like my impression of the book is still overly positive, and I would, to this point, still recommend it to people. Yeah, we'll see what happens next chapter if it all comes together. Because like if it really is like confusing at the end and like you don't really understand, like there's no like satisfying ending or, yeah, it doesn't really like I have no personal interest in John Keats. You know, I knew of the name, so like the destroying him as a person doesn't really bother me that much. I'm more interested in like the world building and like how like all the stuff on Hyperion is like going to come together at the end. So if that comes together in a satisfying way, then you know I'd be happy to recommend this book as to this point, right? So we'll see what happens.
At least I tell you guys what I really think.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I'm sure
that.
the criticism might be that I should do that a little less, but
No. I mean, like, I mean, if we just had a podcast where we talked about, yeah, it's pretty good, I guess. Like, wouldn't be very interesting, right?
Yeah, that's true.
We have
What
a
would
podcast
you,
to discuss media.
since we're almost at the end of this, should we rank so far which chapter is our favorite to least favorite?
We can do it every week if you like.
Well, I mean, given that there's only one episode left.
Yeah,
We'll
I'm
still
kind of
have
interested in your ranking because like this is the most negative you talked about any chapter, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
so it's no mystery that this is my least favorite.
hmm.
A close second least favorite is Kassad's chapter. Favorite chapter would be Saul Weintraub's. Second favorite would be the priest story, and then third place would be Martin Silenus. I bet you didn't expect that
Yeah.
that he'd be third place.
I see.
How about you, Talia?
Oh boy. Um, I really, really liked the priest chapter. It captivated me and made me want to read on. So I'm gonna rank that number one. Um, I got a real kick out of in the beginning was the word, then was the word processor. I can't help myself. It tickled me. Like there's a little references to Chinese characters and linguistic stuff. So yeah, the poet's chapter second. Although I see Priya says Martin Silenus, his full Christian name, which would leave number three, a very close third to the Scholar's Tale. I had such a deep connection. I really adored it. Um, which should say like the strength of the book already. I had three that I quite enjoyed. And then certainly this one trailed. I would say this one would be fourth, and then fifth would be The Soldier's Tale. I only like The Soldier's Tale because it gave me my conspiracy theory about the time tombs and who his mystery lady was. Maybe I'll push it back up for that. Never mind. I had more to say on that.
I would say that in terms of like which romance is worse, I would say
Who do you ship, Priya? Who do you ship?
The romance in The Soldier's Tale is significantly worse than the romance in the Detective's Tale, and both are pretty bad.
Worse in what way?
Worse.
Worse means in unearned terms of, to Priya.
I mean, which one is more vapid and like which one do I care less about? Yeah.
To which be one fair, Kassad is like set up and his chapter says like this is the woman he would never forget and chased across all the world. I don't think we ever have this writing or anything to believe that
not
Johnny and Ron Lamia. Sorry?
Not a word is spoken between Kassad and this woman, and he chases across the world for her.
Exactly, so. That's my point. But in the chapter we just read, no one is ever saying that like this is the one love that she must recall and needs to chase her across all of eternity and all the worlds. They meet, they have a lot of chemistry, you know, they do some birds and bees nature stuff with transistors and wires or whatever a hybrid is, and she gets pregnant. But I don't think they're making it out to be more than what it is. So I think that's why it's a lot more plausible.
What can be more than pregnancy when you're on...
Love can be more than pregnancy.
When you're...
An accidental pregnancy?
When you're on pilgrimage. Well, apparently, that's all that she has left in the end. This pregnancy and this pilgrimage. So... which
and his entire memory in her brain.
Yeah. And like the Reverend Mother memories that he like beamed into her.
Yeah, a lot of it is problematic. What about you, Dan? What about your ranking?
Yeah, I have a really hard time doing number one just because like I hate to be a cop out, but like I really think like the priest tale and the scholar's tale are tied for number one for me. Like I can't like I like them for different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
But that's fair.
Yeah, it's really hard to go. I mean, like I just out of recency bias, like maybe the Scholar's Tale, but like, yeah, it's hard for me to do that. I would guess that like after that would be I don't know, maybe the Soldier's Tale, because the action was well described, even though like the sex scenes were so bad and like the language around the sex scenes were really really uncomfortable.
It's funny because you liked the action, you liked the historical fiction.
Yeah, but it's like it was unnecessary. Like
Two different types of action in that chapter.
Yeah. I mean, we all know the exact phrase I'm thinking about
Yes,
here.
yes, I'm very clear. If you want to know what it is, read the book.
Yeah. And I would say probably the detective's tale after that, and then the poet's tale, because that was the hardest for me to read.
So once again, we're back to a state of sanity in which we all disagree. It was really weird when you and Priya were on the same page.
We do agree, though, on the fact that for me as well, Saul Weintraub's tale and the priest's tale are very closely tied, almost tied. But I can rank them, unlike you, but they're close for me too.
Yeah, well, it's a wonderful chapter.
Yeah,
I told Andreu that we all had strong emotional reactions, and he said that was his reaction as well.
Yeah, and I think Talia, your point about how the priest tale opens the book is also strong. It gets you really invested in the story. Like, oh man, this is gonna be great.
Totally.
Yeah. And then the emotional gut punch of the scholar's tale. And we just read it last week. So yeah, it's really hard for me to kind of to rank them. And I posted this on our internal chat. There's a Reddit poll just recently I don't know how, but Reddit started recommending Hyperion to me. I don't talking about AI, right?
Because your phone is listening to you at all times.
Yeah. I mean, but anyway, there was a poll, and to no surprise, the scholar's tale and I think the priest's tale was number one, and then the scholar's tale was right underneath it, and the other ones were all kind of tied for last place. With the consul's tale not being ranked very high either. So we'll see what happens.
We'll see.
Maybe because it's short and nothing happens, and it's all about the story of the book, right?
Oh, don't say that. Nothing happens.
I mean,
something should happen in
Priya, no one knows. We haven't read it yet.
Yeah, but I'm saying maybe the actual story, the actual his story is maybe very short, and then the rest of the book
is plot progression.
Yeah, is what's happening on Hyperion, right? Maybe that's why. Who knows? We'll see.
I mean, one would hope, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think with that, we'll say thank you for listening. Please check out rehydrate.space for release episodes, reading lists, and all the other stuff we put up there. Leave comments by emailing us at rehydrate@fastmail.com, on Twitter @rehydratepod, or on Mastodon @rehydrate@mast.to. And join us next episode for the finale, part 6, Remembering Siri.